I'm going to propose a radical idea that in order to decrease the budget deficit or eliminate it altogether, we actually need to make the government bigger, the government sector much bigger. It's actually, now let's look at, for instance, what the DOGE program, what that is doing. I contend that that's not even putting barely a dent in the deficit alone, much less the drawing down the U.S. debt. I think that at the most ambitious, in terms of the numbers of layoffs, government layoffs, would be that the DOGE program is proposing would be federal government layoffs would be like 200,000 approximately. And so, but we are not even close to that yet. I think I heard the number I've heard so far, it's been about 62,000 current numbers, as massive as that is. The goal I've heard, I believe I've heard, is that 200,000 layoffs by the of federal government employees by the DOGE program. Now, we would think, well, of course, that would be a huge savings, wouldn't it, for the federal government? I would say, no, it's not. Now, let's say those 200,000, let's say they're getting 100,000 on average annual pay. Well, 200,000 times 100,000 is 20 billion. Now, it sounds like a lot of dollars savings, but that's the deficit alone. This year, 2025, is projected to be $2 trillion. So that's where we're spending. The federal government is spending about 1.9 trillion. I bet it's going to end up being 2 trillion. Let's say 2 trillion. Just make math easier. So $2 trillion shortfall with the government's in terms of what the government spends over what they're taking in terms of revenue. That is 200. So 20. So that if we cut 200,000 jobs, if our average pay, average savings of 100,000 per employee, that comes out to 20 billion. So you know what 20 billion is relative to 2 trillion? Just 1%. Yeah, you multiply 20 billion times 100. That comes up to 2 trillion. Nice 2 trillion. Yeah, right even. So that'd be just 1% reduction in the U.S. deficit, even by if the most ambitious numbers are reached. 200,000 federal government employees, with an average pay of $100,000, that would just put a 1% dent in the U.S. deficit, much less. It have absolutely nothing. Do nothing to the current massive $36.5 trillion U.S. debt that we're currently under. So you're probably wondering, well, what does this have to do with the possibility of increasing the size of the U.S. government? Well, we have to go look at where the outlays are for government spending and what's causing such a high outlays. Why are we spending? Why is the federal government spending so much? And when I'm hearing about I hear a lot in this Democratic Party biased mainstream media. They do talk a lot. They can't talk enough about all the federal government layoffs. However, they're not talking about it doesn't seem like they're talking too much about how DOGE cuts are doing so little to impact the deficit. It's just barely a drop in the bucket. And I think that might be the reason why is because the mainstream media and the Democratic politicians, they're all the same with the Republicans in terms of being basically it's a plutocracy. Both the Republican and Democratic parties are basically members of the same what amounts to a plutocratic party. I know there's no such thing, but Effectively, that's what it is. They're both are controlled by billionaires. Um, I mean, just look at the like with Biden. He he was he got into office because the billionaires didn't want Bernie Sanders bringing his Medicare for All idea into the presidency, so they rallied around the billionaires. They rallied around one candidate, Biden. And then what happened when Biden was obviously cognitive deficient, and so what made Biden finally decide to step down? Oh, it was the pressure by the billionaire donor class of the Democratic Party. So it's the billionaires that are still controlling both parties. And then of course, like with DOGE, Elon Musk, who would ever thought of that? I mean, billionaires get to be billionaires because they serve themselves, not the people. They don't know how to serve people; they serve themselves. So the same with Trump. I mean, they're all self-serving, and so I never would have thought that they'd make a good civil servant. No, but it is what it is. I mean, I'm not. So I mean, of course, I just want to make that clear. I'm not being I'm not trying to parrot some Democratic Party line. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I loathe partisan politics, but I love political philosophy. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just doing a socioeconomic political philosophizing here. And so how would a bigger government help bring down the deficit? We look at the outlays. Where's the most outlays going into? It's going to Social Security, defense, Medicare, health care, which is basically Medicaid, and the interest on the debt. And so we can't do anything really about the interest on the debt. So that you have the health care, which I'll just combine the Medicaid and the Medicare is the health care, and Social Security, and then it's military. So I've basically three categories where we can find ways to cut the outlays there. It's defense, Social Security, and healthcare. It's those areas that we need to basically nationalize. That's my idea, is to nationalize them because they're too expensive, they're too pricey, and so my idea is to, especially with like Social Security. Social Security, that's already nationalized. So then we're looking at defense and healthcare. How are we going to nationalize those? Well, what I'm thinking of is both with instead of having military contractors, arms dealers, well, we just build it all ourselves, and then it'll be all on at cost. We don't have to deal with these overpriced costs on both military armaments and prescription medicines and medical devices. So that's what I'm talking about, nationalizing these industries that provide the supplies that otherwise Medicare and Medicaid and the Defense Pentagon is paying for. But they're paying too much because they're overly inflated, because there's a lack of a competitive marketplace for these items. Although other years of bidding, of course, especially in terms of the Pentagon, but I don't think it works very well. The Pentagon always fails audits, and so I think there's a lot of corruption there, and it's what Eisenhower talked about, the military industrial complex, but I think there's also a medical industrial complex also, and it's just, I don't think there's any way to get around the fact that you can't have a competitive marketplace that'll drive down the cost of military and medical items, and so you just end up with a lot of corruption and waste when there isn't a competitive marketplace to drive adequate price discovery. Instead, you just end up with these prices of items that are grossly overinflated. Then, of course, like like if you're in a hospital, you don't get to shop around for some implant that you're going to get in the surgery. Just whatever they get you, yeah, that's what you get. You can't shop around, and so look for the lowest priced manufacturer, whichever vendor is providing the lowest price, or whatever manufacturers provide the lowest price. No, you just got to pay for. You just get to see it on your bill. If you ever see it, most of the time it just goes into a claim that goes to the insurance companies or Medicare, Medicaid, and so. Well, how can you have price discovery there when you're in the hospital? It just can't happen. There's no competitive marketplace. So that's why there's just these really astronomical prices on claims in the medical field. But of course, both parties, they don't want to talk about this because there's their donors, and on the mainstream media, the advertisers, they're all on the gravy train of these outlays, these tremendous outlays in the health, especially in the healthcare industry, and also in the military industrial complex. So if we made it ourselves, the federal government made it themselves, they could just make everything according to cost, as needed according to specifications. And for those who always seem to contend that the government can never do anything, they never made anything, well, I have this as an example of how the U.S. federal government has long made things. They've long made books. Was like here we have the book Trees, Yearbook of Agriculture, 1949. But that had to be. Went on for decades before that, where the U.S. government published books, pamphlets, maps out of the U.S. government printing office. And like this one, this book on trees was written by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and published, bound and printed by the U.S. government printing office. And so yeah, they made these. U.S. federal government has long made things, publications. Now it's known as the U.S. Government Publishing Office. So they're still around today. This was back in 1949, and they're around long before then. They do a good job, well bound, well written. So yes, the government can make things. They can do a good job. I think you go back to, for instance, like during the Iraq wars, it was switched over for the logistics support, was switched over to private companies, and by all accounts, they did a worse job. The private companies did in the logistics support for the troops than when it was done fully through the U.S. government, U.S. military. So that's just one example where the private entities do a worse job at a higher cost. So I just wanted to bring this prop up as an example of how the government can and does make things, and does a good job generally of that. I'm going to put this book away now. All right, I also wanted to make it clear that I'm not proposing a Marxist brand of government owning the means of production. I'm actually very against Marxism. Marxism is actually I consider it to be a cult, a religious cult, not a political philosophy. I'm proposing a political philosophy that introduces more government owning the means of production in some cases, and in some instances, in order to improve the economic freedoms for Americans. And that's the only reason I'm proposing this, is to improve the economic freedom for all individual Americans. Whereas Marxism does not recognize the individual as having any rights whatsoever. Actually, Marxism is not a progressive ideology. In reality, it is based on some esoteric ideology of Georg Hegel, and the idea is modified by Marx of society somehow progressing towards an end of history where all individuality ceases to exist altogether, where all individuals become assimilated into a Borg collective hive mind, in which we've achieved what Hegel, where Hegel titled his book "The Phenomenology of Spirit" in singular. So it's just everybody gets all congealed, all assimilated into one, where there's no more individuals to even make any history. So it's a complete end of history and a complete end of all individuality whatsoever. So for Marxism, the individual does not count at all. And for Marxism, it's the government owning the means of production is just a means of an end of creating that one the one blob. Eventually, it's just a means to that end. It's not a means to the end of helping individuals. But that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about collectivism for the sake of individualism. But for Marxism, it's collectivism for the sake of collectivism. So I'm completely opposite of Marxism, in fact. And so, yeah, I mean, like the government printing office I was just talking about, that went on all the way through the Cold War era, where there was very against Marxism, and it went on just fine. This is not some kind of a segue into Marxist Communist Party ideology. Marxist communist system. No, not at all. I think that, for instance, as far as healthcare goes, that we should just leave like over-the-counter medicine there. The competitive marketplace works more or less to maintain reasonable prices and adequate supply of healthcare items for over-the-counter non-prescription. That the problem lies with the prescription medicines and medtech medical devices. So, yeah, I was going to think about something else. One moment. All right, now, in order for the government to take over much of the prescription medical sector, there'd be the issue of intellectual property, because much of the medicines, prescription medicines and medtech are currently patent protected. Some are, and some are not. But the ones that are, when we claim that there is that would violate their property rights, and if their government was to use that would violate the Fifth Amendment of seizing the property without just compensation. It would be my contention that Fifth Amendment would not apply there, because intellectual property is not real property. It's not real estate, of course. It's not anything real about it. It is actually a misnomer to call intellectual property property. It is actually rights. It's just a right that has been granted by the law to the owner of that right. But it's just a regular law that allows the right to what something that is just labeled property, intellectual property, but is not in fact property. Therefore, it would not violate the Fifth Amendment. So there would be no need for the government to amend the Constitution for the government to utilize these ideas, these patents, without compensating Big Pharma and BigMedtech for the rights to use that. There might need to be some laws changed, but it would just be ordinary laws. We'd not have to amend the Constitution. Of course, when the Constitution was written, whenever the Fifth Amendment was written, I don't think that was, well, was there any patent rights then? I don't think there was, but I don't think, back then it was not called intellectual property. It was just patent rights. It's just they knew that it was just a right that was legally granted. So all that would be needed to be done would be to just amend the laws so that the government just could utilize patents without compensating Big Pharma and BigMedtech for them. Another objection would be, potential objection, I'm sure that would be presented, is that that would stifle innovation. I would contend that it was just the opposite, that would encourage innovation, because most of the people who go into research go into it not for profit, but for to help the patients in the end, to help the patients, to help society. And whenever they're employed by these engineers and scientists, when they're employed by a company, medtech or big pharma, they're typically they do not get any royalties once they discover some new drug or medical device and it gets patented. The most they'll get is like a plaque acknowledging that their name's on the patent, but they typically, the employees, the engineers and scientists, typically when they get hired on, they give up their rights to the royalties, patent royalties, to that item in exchange for a regular paycheck and benefits. So whether these scientists and researchers are working for the government or big pharma corporations, the remuneration is going to be the same. I mean, the financial motives are going to be the same. But, however, when they're working for the government, then they're not going to be restricted by the bean counters at the corporations. Because when you're working for the corporations, they're going to be limited by in terms of what avenues they can go down to, in terms of whether or not that will be beneficial to the shareholders of the corporation, that the executives are. They're looking out for the executives. So it's the executives are not of these corporations are not the ones that are doing the innovations. It's the scientists and engineers. So if they're working over for the government, then they'll be much more freer to explore whatever is the most effective and safe medication or medical device for the patient in terms of innovation. Whereas when we're working for corporations, they're looking for what's the most profitable way to innovate to help the bottom line for the shareholders of that corporation. So it would actually help innovation for these scientists and engineers who are in that they go into the field to help people, not to help the profit bottom lines for some corporation. So I think the motivation is going to be that will help for allow them to utilize what they've been what's driving them into to innovate is to help people, and they'll be unshackled if they're working for the government rather than some greedy corporation. When you have the government running these innovation, research and development, and manufacturing and distribution of pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and also armaments, then it'll be just a matter of just doing it at cost, and there you can start getting into trillions of dollars of savings. And also, you may have to go into the government running hospitals also. It's like, at least in terms of the for-profit ones, I think maybe also a part of the problem of corruption and waste and fraud and abuse. So either mandate all hospitals have to be not for profit. I think that's the case in Minnesota, where all hospitals are have to be not for profit by law, but that's just a Minnesota thing. That may need to be done nationwide. All hospitals have to be not for profit, or the government might have to start opening up their own hospitals. But yeah, then you start getting the savings of trillions, because and then you could do that savings, cost cutting in healthcare and defense without reducing the healthcare, at least in healthcare, without reducing the benefits or the care, the level of care that's provided to the patients. But at the same time, reducing the cost and providing the same or better level of care than they're currently getting in Medicare and Medicaid. But in order to do that, you're going to have to increase the size of the government. So overall, the government will increase, but as I was talking before, the cost of the payroll is very minuscule. So you're going to increase the number of payroll actually, rather than decrease it, but the cost of the payroll is minuscule in terms of relative to the total outlay of the government budget. So if you can decrease, actually, overall decrease the budget while increasing the payroll, because it's just astronomical, the amount that's spent on healthcare through Medicare and Medicaid. But there's going to be a lot of resistance to that, not because it's a bad idea, but because there's so many companies, corporations, individuals that are on the gravy train of those outlays, because it's so much money. These corporations are getting so much paid through the Medicaid and Medicare, and that's to pay for all these overpriced medical devices and pharmaceuticals. If that was to come to an end, oh boy, that would be a huge drop in the revenue of these corporations. Oh man, both Medicare, medicine, and defense. Can you imagine? So it's not because it's a bad idea, just because these corporations are just dependent on the outlays from the spending by the federal government. That would be a tremendous hit to these corporations. I haven't even talked about all these foreign military bases that I don't think we need. What's the purpose in terms of defense? I don't think there is really much. So we close all those foreign military bases also. That's a whole. I haven't even talked about that, but yes, I do think that too. That's another huge savings that we could get into by just closing like we're up to like 800 military bases around the world. We've had for many decades now. It was just, that's a tremendous expense that we're paying for, and there's really nothing exigent that we're not in danger of being invaded, right? So what's the point of them? There's no real justification for them. So let's just close them all, shutter them, mothball them, or sell them. Get to tremendous savings there as well. But yeah, all these job cuts, layoffs, they're just a drop in the bucket. But my idea, now that could be more than a drop in the bucket. We could actually eliminate the deficit altogether, I believe, if we really worked hard at just producing, providing health care, at pharmaceuticals, medical devices. Let's go into that for the U.S. government and just provide everything at cost. Then we could maybe eliminate the deficit altogether and start whittling away at the U.S. debt. That's my idea. Also, I just wanted to present it, and if you're still watching, thanks for watching.